this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 16 of the So Free Art podcast, which is a little podcast I do each week about art and things. And this one's going to be all about putting out imperfect work, and it's something I've been struggling with this week with my YouTube videos, because I still haven't put out another YouTube video since last week, and I was supposed to put one out, I wanted to put one out last week, but because I was spending so much time wanting things to be perfect, I ended up not doing anything. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. But something else I was going to talk about as well was Reiki healing and psychic readings, because I actually saw a psychic on Thursday, and she did like an hour's reading and an hour of Reiki healing, and I'd actually never heard of Reiki healing before, but so much stuff happened during those 2 hours that I'd like to talk about it on the podcast, but I think maybe I need a little bit more time to sort of process what happened and stuff, so I'll maybe talk about that next week. But I'm also going to write about it on the website, so I definitely think Reiki healing is something to look into, because I never knew nothing about it, but it definitely did something. That's all I can say. But this week's podcast is going to be about imperfect work, and you can find show notes and stuff on the website at sofreeart.com. And like I say, I think this one will only be little, but because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so with my drawing and painting and stuff, a lot of the times I don't do things because I think I won't be able to do it good enough, so I'm not even going to bother. And that's not a really good way to do things, because I've just forgot. Last week on the podcast, Nick showed up at the end and gate crashed the podcast, which was quite funny, and he started playing guitar very randomly, but I started playing around on his guitar, and I realised just how fun and relaxing it was. So on Tuesday I picked up a second-hand guitar. So I don't know if you can hear that, but I now own a guitar, and I've just been playing around with it, and it is a lot of fun. So I wanted to say about that, and that kind of links in with the psychic reading, because here's a little taster of what she said. But she said that in a previous life I was actually a musician, and that music is very important in my life, even now. And she said that I can actually read music, and I never said anything about this, but it just seems very strange that 2 days before I picked up a guitar, and she says, and that's something I noticed with the psychic reading, is that so many things she said which were really specific was kind of spot on. So I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I'm not, but so that's something that I'll try and talk about next week. So with imperfect work, I've always been like a perfectionist, and it has stopped me doing a lot of things. And something I've noticed is it's not just art. Even with my transition, I've learnt a lot about how putting out imperfect work is actually better. It's a bit scary because you have to put stuff out which you think isn't good enough, and you put stuff out knowing that it isn't as good as maybe you could do. But something I've noticed as an example is when doing a drawing, you can work on a realistic drawing, and after, let's say 10 hours, you might have a drawing which is kind of finished. It's maybe 80%, but you carry on working on it because you know you can do it better, and you're trying to aim for this sort of perfect image, even though that doesn't really exist. And so what ends up happening is, because the final, let's say 20% of a drawing, it's then that you end up having to spend so much more time for much more little results, if that makes sense. I think they call it like diminishing returns or something, where you end up putting in way more effort than the results you're going to get. So, like you can with a drawing, you could just end up spending, and painting as well. I noticed you can spend hours and hours like fiddling with things which you don't really need to. You could have just released it at a certain point, and sometimes you can actually make things worse by working on them too long. But it's hard because you know in your head you can do it better. So it's trying to find that balance between releasing something or saying something is finished, even though you know it could be better. And I think it comes back to that thing of being good enough. And this kind of, it's not just art that I've noticed this with, it's pretty much everything. Even this podcast, I put doing the podcast off for a couple of years because I always thought my voice wouldn't be good enough. And so because I thought that, I never even bothered doing the podcast. And if I kept waiting for things to be perfect, I probably would never have done a podcast. Whereas by putting the podcast out, knowing that it's not as good as I would like it to be, but it's good enough, I actually at least have a podcast. And it works with drawing as well. Like there's a certain point where you just have to say that this drawing is good enough and move on to the next one. But it's really hard, and I've always struggled with that. And I'm now struggling with it with the YouTube videos, because I put a video out a week and a half ago saying that I was going to start my YouTube videos back up, and the plan was to do one last week. And I've got in my head all these different ideas for videos, like talking about each of my drawings but pulling them apart and showing various techniques of stuff, of like how to do things. So like demonstrating how to do realistic fur or realistic hair and stuff like that. But I haven't done anything because I spent the whole week thinking this wouldn't be good enough, because I kept saying that I needed to make the titles of the videos. I wanted to have it be sort of flashy intros and have text moving about and better quality video and all this. And then it was this morning when I realised I hadn't done anything. I'd spent a couple of days during the week learning various video editing techniques. But again, I realised that was going to be never ending, because there's always something more to learn. And at some point you just have to stop and make the video as best you can. And I realised that this morning when I noticed that I hadn't put anything out, and I hadn't even filmed a video yet. So what I decided this morning was that I'm just going to film the video. Well, firstly I'm going to pick a certain day, and I think it's either going to be a Tuesday or Wednesday, and that's going to be the day each week when the video goes out, which is just what I've done with the podcast. So every Sunday the podcast goes out, and I normally record it on a Saturday night, which kind of works quite nice. So I'm going to try and get the same setup with the videos. So that's the first thing, which I think is like an accountability thing. And when you make a promise that you're going to do something, like on your website or something, it's much harder to sort of not do it. It makes you do it. So I'm going to do that with the videos. But the main thing I realised was I'm just going to record the video as best I can, edit it together as best I can, and I'm going to do it as best I can, basically, and just have it be good enough, instead of spending all this time trying to make the graphics fancy and stuff. Because what I think is that if I just get the videos put out there, like in a couple of years' time, I'll be able to learn how to do like flashy intros and stuff. So I'd rather have a load of videos with just normal text intros rather than have no videos, because I'm waiting until I'm better at doing things. And the same thing is true of, because I realised, I was thinking about this morning, And the exact same thing happened with my transition, especially, for instance, going to work. I put off going to work because I always thought I can't go to work as me until I've got rid of all my facial hair. But the facial hair could take, for instance, 2, 3, 4 years until it's all gone. And so I was going to have to either wait around for 3 years until all my facial hair had gone. But at some point I just said, I'm good enough the way I am, and I'll go to work with a little bit of facial hair here and there, because that's the best I can do at the moment. And the weird thing is, it's that thing of when you, by going to work as my imperfect self, I kind of ended up becoming my perfect self, because it allowed me to fully accept myself. And it almost means now that getting rid of all the facial hair isn't that important, because if I can go to work with a little bit of facial hair, it just means if I can get rid of all the facial hair, that's an added bonus, instead of it being something that stops me doing anything. And it's exactly the same with the videos. It's if I can put the video out there with these imperfect intros and stuff, then if I can one day do nice, better intros, then that would be a bonus. But I would accept the videos the way they are. They would be good enough. So I think this is what it all boils down to, is it's finding the balance between putting stuff out there which is good enough. So it doesn't mean you put rubbish stuff out. It just means that you don't spend all your time trying to get this perfect image, which is impossible really, because you maybe even don't have enough skills to do it. And it's only going to come by doing the thing. So in other words, put all these videos out, and in the end you will learn techniques as you're going along. And I think that would even be better for everybody, because it's better for the person making the videos, because they're getting more videos out. They're also going to be learning while they're doing it, instead of just learning and waiting until they've learnt everything before doing anything. So, and it's also going to motivate. It will also motivate you, because you're putting stuff out there and you're sort of seeing what does and doesn't work. But it also, I think, it's going to benefit everybody else, because people watching the video, for instance, will be able to watch the progress of the video improving, which might actually be quite inspiring. Because if I was watching a video and I was seeing it getting better, I might be able to look at the first one and think, I can do that. and then you see where it ends up. You're kind of thinking, if I just start doing a video now, maybe I can get a good video. Do you see? And I think that works with everything, like drawing. I think this is why it's probably a really good idea to actually put everything out there, as long as it's good enough. So you still put the effort in to make it as good as you can, but you're not spending all this time perfecting it. So that's basically what I'm thinking. And so I've decided that this week it's going to be either Tuesday or Wednesday. I think Wednesday might be better because I have an art class on Tuesdays. So I'm going to aim for either Tuesday or Wednesday to get a video out, and I'm going to make it a weekly thing, and just see what happens, see how it goes from there. But something else I also thought about this morning was, because I was thinking to myself, I want to do a video pulling each of my drawings apart, but I didn't know which one to start with. And then I thought, why not start with the first one? And that's when I first thought about imperfect work, because the first drawing on my website isn't as good as the later ones, because obviously I didn't have as much practice and stuff. But so I started thinking, well, I can't put a video out of that first one because it's not as good as what I would like it to be. And then I started thinking, maybe this is the best place to start putting the video out, because you can sort of say, back then I was doing this and now I've learnt this. So it might actually be a really good way to start it. And something else I learnt or realised was that I haven't drawn any video game characters for ages, and that was what I was doing right at the start. And I actually, like this morning I really felt like I wanted to start drawing a video game character. So I think maybe like one of my true passions is drawing video game characters, and I've sort of lost that. And just looking at my old drawings this morning, because my first few drawings were all video game characters, it just made me realise that maybe I'd forgotten about one of the reasons why I started drawing for these video game characters, and especially now that I'm starting to do digital painting and stuff, I think it might be good to start bringing the video game characters back in. So the only weird thing about that is I don't play video games anymore, so it'd probably have to be retro characters and stuff, but I might just start looking into really cool, because the thing with video game characters is they're so stylised and really cool, and it's the same with anime. That's actually something I started last week. I started watching anime again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one 20-minute video, which is one episode. I'm going to do one episode a day, and whilst I'm watching it I'm going to take screen grabs and then turn those screen grabs into little sketches. So I'm going to be practicing drawing whilst watching. Because again, right at the start of drawing in 2013, I was always watching anime and sketching. So I'm kind of going back to like how it all started, which is a bit weird. And I just realised that, talking about it, I just realised I'm going back to how it started. But the other thing was, I was thinking like, I've got this idea of having Lil Sophie, doing little sketches of Lil Sophie dressed up as video game characters, which I think would be quite funny. But I think the main thing is I just want to get into the routine of doing videos, and the main hurdle at the moment was me thinking everything had to be perfect. And like I say, I think the key is actually being okay with stuff being imperfect. And so that's what I've learnt today. Hopefully you sort of found that a bit interesting. And that's pretty much it. Next week, I've actually got another float session next Friday, so I'm looking forward to that. I might talk about that on the podcast, but hopefully next week's podcast will be about Reiki healing and maybe the psychic reading. I hope you enjoyed that one. You can find show notes at sofreeart.com. You can find me at sophielawson.com. If you have a question or anything, you can do sophie@sophielawson.com. And my YouTube is youtube.com/sophielawson. And there will be a new video this week. I'll make sure of that. But all that's left is this week's inspirational quote, and it actually goes to Sean McCabe from SeanWest.com, and it is: the only way to close the gap between what you've made and the image in your mind is by continuing to put out imperfect work. Sean McCabe.